Welcome to the channel. I'm a doctor. I've seen things that don't always fit into textbooks. Moments that no protocol can prepare you for. Some of these stories are my own. Others were shared with me by colleagues, nurses, paramedics, people who, like me, carry the weight of these moments long after the shift ends. Some stories start with a scream. Others begin with blood, a sudden fall, or someone crying in the emergency room. This one started with a woman and her go-to medical diagnosis. It's just anxiety. It was a Tuesday. 11:43 a.m. I was running on 3 cups of coffee, half a granola bar, and a headache brewing like a summer storm. A man in his 50s walked in, pale, soaked in sweat, breathing like he'd just run a marathon uphill with a backpack full of bricks. He barely spoke. Honestly, he could barely breathe. And with him, his wife. "Good morning, sir. Are you okay?" I asked as I approached him to help. His wife glanced at my face, probably noticing the concern in my expression. Before he could answer, she jumped in. "Doctor, don't be alarmed," she said, brushing off my question. "This happens to him all the time. It's anxiety. He just needs to breathe and stop thinking negative thoughts." And there it was. Another proud graduate from the university of my personal experience. I don't go lie for a moment. I buy it. But still, I stayed neutral. His appearance didn't exactly scream nothing serious. So I replied calmly, "I understand, but let me do a quick check before we assume anything." We placed him on a stretcher. Oxygen saturation, 86. We gave him supplemental oxygen. His blood pressure was low. His heart rate was racing. His lips had that faint bluish hue, and his fingertips were cold. At that point, I was no longer thinking anxiety. I was thinking something far worse. Meanwhile, the wife kept going. "Look, the more machines you hook him up to, the worse he gets. Last time, they kept him in observation for 12 hours, and it was just a panic attack. Just a panic attack. As if mental health wasn't worth taking seriously either. But this time was different. Very different." The patient couldn't speak. His eyes were wide open, like he knew exactly what was coming. Like he'd felt this before, but this time it was worse. "Chest pain?" I asked. He nodded. "Any swelling in your legs recently?" Another faint nod. Silence. "Have you been on bed rest lately? Long trips?" The wife cut in again. "He's fine. It's all in his head. He doesn't know how to manage stress. Told him to try yoga or meditation, but he never listens." And maybe she was right, but not in the way she thought. We did an ECG. Normal. Chest x-ray. Useless. And when I reported the results, it only seemed to make her more annoyed. "See? I told you. He just needs something to calm him down and he'll be fine." At this point, there was little I could say to change her mind. But my gut was screaming at me. One of those instincts that digs into your stomach and won't let go. So I told her, politely but firmly. In medicine, we always rule out the dangerous things first. Once we're sure it's nothing serious, we can consider less critical diagnoses. Rolled her eyes and said, "Fine, do whatever you want." I ordered an arterial blood gas and a D-dimer test. And finally something lit up. The D-dimer came back extremely elevated. That was our green light. We rushed him to a contrast-enhanced CT scan of the lungs. While they were prepping him, she kept talking. And to be fair, she wasn't a bad person. She was just sure of herself. Far too sure. I know him. He's had anxiety attacks for years. It always starts like this. Shortness of breath, sweating, turns pale, but then it goes away. He just needs to calm down. You're only making it worse. While she spoke those words, her husband was minutes away from dying from a massive pulmonary embolism. The scan didn't lie. There it was, a huge clot, plug blocking the main pulmonary artery. No blood reaching the lungs. No blood, no oxygen. No oxygen, the body begins to shut down. We jumped into action. For anticoagulants, ICU consult. Prepared for deterioration. During the transfer, and at that moment, she went silent, in shock, as if the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place, as if the word clot had cracked the wall of denial. But regret always comes late, thankfully. not too late for him. That night, we managed to stabilize him. His oxygen levels normalized, his blood pressure improved, the heart rate slowed, and when he opened his eyes, wearing an oxygen mask, the first thing he did was look for her. The moment their eyes met, she broke down in tears, held his hand, whispered, "Apologies." He looked back at her and said nothing. But in his eyes was a silent, "I told you so," not with anger. With quiet resignation, a few days later, now recovering, I spoke with him. "We always blamed it on anxiety," he told me. "My dad was the same way. I grew up thinking that feeling like this was normal, that it wasn't serious. I didn't know what to say, because some things aren't in textbooks. Entire lives are spent learning how to downplay pain, to pretend it's all in your head, to believe that if no one sees it, it doesn't exist. And sometimes that belief kills," I explained. This to him gently. "It's not that you need to run to the ER over every little thing, but feeling unwell isn't normal either. Whether it's anxiety or a clot in your lung, the important thing is to treat it so it doesn't happen again." This case stayed with me. It's not just because of the medical complexity, but because of the human side. His wife wasn't the villain. She was someone who had spent years watching her husband collapse and then recover. She had learned to associate these episodes with anxiety because, well, it had never been serious until it was, and this isn't rare. How many patients show up with symptoms dismissed as psychological? How often is pain real but invisible? Even as doctors, when a family member tells us he's anxious or she's a hypochondriac, we sometimes lower our guard, try to fit the symptoms into that neat little box. But over time, we learn, listen more to the symptoms. Trust your gut. Don't jump to labels. The problem isn't anxiety. The problem is that when everything is labeled as anxiety, nothing gets taken seriously. And yes, sometimes it is anxiety. But even then, it deserves respect, evaluation, never indifference. That night, leaving the hospital, I remembered another patient. She had shortness of breath, palpitations, a gut feeling that something was wrong. I told her it was anxiety. 3 days later, she died of a silent heart attack. Since then, I've tried to be more cautious, even when my instinct says it's just anxiety. Sometimes, it's better to make sure, because the obvious can be deadly, and what seems psychological might be physiological, and what you ignore doesn't heal. Weeks later, the man returned for a follow-up. He walked slowly with a portable oxygen tank, but his wife walked beside him. She didn't say much, just whispered, "Thank you." And before he left, he told me something I keep in mind every time a patient walks in through those doors. "Next time someone says it's anxiety, check for the clot anyway, doc. Sometimes people die quietly. Medicine isn't an exact science. But if there's one thing we can be certain of, listening to the patient is always the first step to saving their life." Have you ever been told you were exaggerating? That it was just anxiety? But deep down you knew something wasn't right. Your story in the comments. Your words might help someone else feel heard. Before it's too late, if this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. Here we share real, emotional, and human stories, sometimes dramatic, sometimes ironic, but always honest. Because in medicine, like in life, not everything is black and white. And sometimes what looks like anxiety is death knocking on the door. See you in the next video.